Good morning, everybody. Just setting a couple of these things up while you join me here on this Friday. Hope you're doing well. Excited for the weekend. Let me know what you're doing this weekend. Got a lot to talk about with regards to First Alert Safety Desk, but definitely just chime in. Let me know where you're watching from, what your plans are. We've got some heat headed our way, which is actually part of the conversation that we're going to have. I had a big report that I actually collaborated on with Steve Balon. I'm going to get some of the important things up on the screen for you. Our time, temperature, there we go, 8:05 this morning, 62 degrees. Just getting started here with talking about First Alert Safety Desk. Some big stories that we covered throughout the weekend. Honestly, it was mostly back to school stuff with so many kids headed back to school. Starting next week with Green Bay, but we did have some students start this week too, and then a lot more of them start September 3rd. So we did again dedicate things to back to school at the First Alert Safety Desk. And so I'm just going to show you here per usual. And if you're new to this and haven't really heard of the First Alert Safety Desk stories, there are stories that keep you and your family safe. All of them at WBAY.com under the Safety Desk tab right here, as you're seeing. Some really important stories. I think I will start from the top down this time. This story really important. Today's student athletes facing more extreme heat. It was a story that actually Steve passed along to me, and so we collaborated on this one. Climate Central is a nonprofit. They talk about weather, how weather's changing, climate control, all of that. And so climate change, I should say. Climate Central is their name. But I'm going to try to pull up some of this. We're going to wait for, there we go, some of the information to pop on the screen right here. You could see we talked about how the heat going into the future here. So this is a bigger story than just today or just next week. This is talking about overall. So this is new research that says to expect more extremely hot days for school sports. So if you have a student, a child that's an athlete, this is so important because this report says the hot days have become more frequent in 88% of cities it looked at across the United States, and even Green Bay was on that list. Climate Central, again, nonprofit organization, and they took all of these cities and they found that a lot of them, 88% again, experiencing at least one additional week's worth of extremely hot days than they did back in the 1970s. We thought that was very interesting. And then health experts say exercising and playing sports outside during extreme heat, it's risky for athletes of all ages, whether you're an athlete in, the Olympics or in high school. So it really doesn't matter. Obviously, this impacts all of us and all of our kids who play sports. So take a look at this report if you'd like. I did have some solutions for parents and coaches, including things like athletes should get a medical screening to make sure that their bodies can handle extreme heat. And if you can, take a look at the video right here on our website is why I pulled it up, and I'll kind of play a little bit of it because I talked a little bit of what I just mentioned right now, but then I walked over to the weather wall with Steve to talk about it from a meteorological perspective. The temperature trends going up for the next few days, but it's beyond what we're seeing now or even what we saw yesterday. This is overall, and it's a big conversation moving forward. We do have more days that are hotter that we're tacking on as time goes on. Climate change a factor in that, and so Steve went into detail talking about that, pulling up some of the graphics that Climate Central actually provided for all of us. You see that right there with the map. More hot days, change in hot days. Very interesting stuff if you want to take a look at that. Again, WBAY.com under the Safety Desk tab. So I'll choose a different story. Again, that one was such a big one, so important with so many kids practicing right now in the late summer for school sports. And then some other back to school stories that we talked about. Playgrounds, hidden hazards. We talked about looking for hazards when you're touring your child's school or taking them to class on the first day, and just really talking to your child about back to school safety is a big factor. Whether they're walking or biking to school is so important. That one was another big story that I had at WBAY.com. I'm going to pull that up here in just a second. There it is. And then we did this one. This one, authorities warning parents about drug-laced snacks after a Fond du Lac traffic stop. So parents, you're just strongly encouraged to talk to your child about the risks associated with consuming unknown snacks and candies. We're talking about these edibles, the THC edibles that are in some places legal. It depends on what you're talking about, but we do see certain ones here in Wisconsin that are legal. And what officials are worried about is that children have easy access to them and they can get very sick from them. So take a look at that. Also, back to school photo dangers. I thought that one was really important. We all get so excited about the first day of school. Just be mindful of certain things because scammers are always on the lookout for all sorts of things. And so oversharing information on those boards, you know, whether it's their first day or, you know, the last day of school, making sure that you're not posting things like your child's school, their uniform, things like that. Again, scammers, they're out to steal your identity, so they will use certain things. And in the background, we were talking about the background too, which also matters. If you are taking a photo of your child on the first day of school, make sure there's no house number in the back, something super generic. And you can, of course, still save that memory. It's a great memory, but just being mindful of what you're putting up there. Their birth date, don't do that. Don't do their teacher's name, their school name. All of that is very, very important. And several law enforcement agencies posted on social media about this and saying to just please be careful because they do see it. If you're just joining us, I'm going over some of the First Alert Safety Desk stories that I covered throughout the work week this week as we're now into Friday. Good morning to you, Jody. Thanks for being here. A great weekend in store. Of course, we do have the heat, though, headed our way. We just talked about the heat, and then we are talking about back to school safety here from the digital news desk this morning dedicated to safety. Another story that I mentioned this week was the adding vaccines to your back to school list. I'll pull that up here so you know where to find it. I'll take my name out. Here we go. Scrolling a little bit down further at WBAY.com under the Safety Desk tab right here. Take a look at that. There's some changes that I wanted to let you know about this week, and in case you missed it, this is really important for parents to know. And health officials, you know, of course, they always want your vaccines to be updated, but the changes are really important because you can no longer call the school and report an exemption from the chickenpox vaccine for your child. I thought that was really important. I'm going to pull that up a little bit here for myself to read. So obviously adding vaccines to your back to school list, super important. So talking about the chickenpox vaccine, again, you can no longer do that where you call and report the exemption from the chickenpox vaccine. You actually are now required to have a diagnosis from a qualified healthcare provider. You have to be exempt from that immunization via a doctor. Also, starting this upcoming school year, this is very important too. If you've got a 7th grader, they're required to be vaccinated against meningitis before they start school, while a booster dose is required for eligible 12th graders. So a couple changes there to required vaccines, just something to keep in mind. And I'm sure schools have let you know about this, but just a reminder again. I'm trying to think of another couple stories. Honestly, they were all back to school related. I think the biggest one for all of us to remember is the fact that we're going to start to see a lot more kiddos walking and biking out there. So we talked about the dangers of that and just talking to your kids about being safe as they're going to and from school, staying off the phone, making sure they're not distracted as they're crossing the street, all of that. And of course, we were talking about the little boy who passed away in Fond du Lac who was hit by a car, and we just have to get back into that mindset of driving slower in neighborhoods and anticipating that kids are out there and they're trying to get to school safely and back home safely too. So take a look at WBAY.com if you can. We've got lots of great stories for back to school, lots of great information to keep you and your family safe. Otherwise, I think that will do it for me. I've got to go back upstairs to do some more work in the studio, and then I will see you back on the air for Action 2 News mid-morning at 9 a.m. Have a great weekend.